I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I used to hate how skinny my legs were. One, because I had barely any muscle to my legs, I constantly suffered from knee pain, which just made everyday life so much harder. Two, because my legs were that skinny, leggings never fitted. Like, they'd always bunch up at the knees, and even when I did get a pair that fitted the size of my legs, they were basically shorts. But when I learned how to train my quads effectively, my knee stability improved, my lower body strength increased dramatically, and now I feel confident wearing leggings. So in this video, I'm going to share with you all of the quad training mistakes that you need to avoid if you don't want skinny legs, as well as my top tips for quad growth and how to structure your very own quad workout so you can all become Quadzilla. This video is part of our muscle growth series where we're going through all of the different muscle groups, learning how to target each muscle group effectively for the most growth. So go and catch up at the end of this video, but first, in order to train our quads effectively, we actually need to know how our quads are made up. So it's time for a tiny bit of quad anatomy. As the name suggests, the quads are made up of four main muscles. The rectus femoris crosses both the hip and the knee joint and assists with hip flexion and knee extension. The other three quad muscles only cross the knee joint. First, we've got the vastus lateralis, and this is the outer quad sweep. This is really one of the muscles that gives the most shape to your quads. Then we've got the vastus medialis, which is on the inner part of your quad, and it contributes to the teardrop shape and knee stabilization. Underneath the rectus femoris, we've got the vastus intermedius, and this helps with knee extension. So since all four quad muscles cross the knee joint, the movements that involve knee extension are going to be crucial for growth. But before we jump into the top tips that are going to help you maximize that growth, first I've got 3 mistakes that you need to avoid. Mistake number 1 is using the wrong squat technique. There's a squat technique that people with well-developed quads tend to use, and I'm guessing because you're watching this video, you're probably not using it. But it's been shown that angling your shin further forward during the squat activates the quads more and leads to greater muscle growth than the shins in a more upright position, which favors the glutes. We'll cover how you can get more out of the squat to emphasize quad growth in a second, but this technique doesn't just apply to squats, it applies to things like leg press as well. If you take a look at the leg press, then having your feet lower down on the pad puts more emphasis on the quads, and then having a higher foot position emphasizes the glutes more. This matches up with the shin angles we saw during the squat, so it should be quite intuitive. I'm personally in the camp of people who finds it really hard to get into the squat position and prioritize the quads, and it mainly comes down to our ankle mobility. So to help you get more depth, there's a few things we can do. The first one is put weight plates underneath your heels so that your heels are slightly elevated above the ground. This will reduce the amount of ankle mobility that you actually need, so you'll be able to get deeper into the squat and your shins further forward, which will help emphasize your quads more. It can also help massively if you get the proper weightlifting shoes, and these basically act in the same way as the plates because they've got a very elevated heel. Another way that a lot of people find helps them get more depth in their squats is switching from a back squat to a front squat. This is automatically going to put your body in a more upright position, and a lot of people find that they can get more depth that way. Front squats are really great for quad activation because of this, and you can get more out of the movement even if you're using a lighter weight than you would with a traditional back squat. The only downside is the front squat can be quite uncomfortable and it's a bit harder to learn the proper technique. So give it a go, see if you like it, but if not, then just use some of the other techniques to help you get more depth. For quad growth, in terms of how wide your stance should be, the research doesn't really show much difference whether you have your feet at shoulder width apart or slightly wider. So what I'd say is just do what feels most comfortable for you, because that way you're likely going to be able to push harder and get more out of it. Mistake number 2 is relying too much on squats. Barbell back squats are often recommended as the best exercise for quads, but along with your quads, there's actually a lot of stabilizing muscles like your lower back that are also highly engaged in the squat movement. And some people find that these stabilizing muscles can actually fatigue before your quads truly hit muscular failure. And that's going to leave gains on the table. I definitely relate to this. My upper body seems to get a pretty good workout when I'm doing squats, but there are ways that we can work around this. I know a lot of people are diehard free weight users, but this 2022 study actually concluded that machines and free weights pretty much elicit the same amount of muscle growth. If you're someone like me who finds that your stabilizing muscles or your back fatigue faster than your quads do in regular squats, then using machines is going to be a really good option. Things like the hack squat, leg press, pendulum squat, and Smith machine take pretty much all of the stability aspects out of the movement, so you can purely focus on just hammering your quads. Depending on the machine you use, there will still be a certain amount of upper body involvement, but being more locked in place with the machine is going to put you at an advantage if you really want to target your quads. At the end of the video, I'll show you how to structure machine work into your routine, but for now, let's move on to mistake number 3. neglecting isolation exercises. Some people will say you just need to do squats and your quads will grow. And yeah, this is true to some extent because all of the quad muscles cross the knee joint. However, the rectus femoris is the only quad muscle that also crosses the hip joint, and it's not activated as much in the squatting movements as the other 3 quad muscles. So that's why we need some other movements in our routine like sissy squats or leg extension where our hips are in more of a fixed position so that we can activate the rectus femoris that bit more. This 2021 study compared the growth of 3 different areas of the rectus femoris over 5 weeks, with half of the participants doing only squats and the other half only doing leg extension. The leg extension group saw significantly greater growth in all 3 areas at the end of the 5 weeks, while the squat group didn't see any significant growth in any of the 3 areas at all. So if you're trying to grow your quads and that doesn't convince you to start including leg extensions, I don't know what will. Okay, so now you know to avoid those mistakes, here's 3 top tips to maximize your quad gains. Tip number 1 is how to target different areas of the quads. When doing leg extensions, you can target the vastus lateralis or the outer sweep of your quad a bit more if you point your feet inwards. These 2 studies both came to the same conclusion, but there doesn't seem to be much evidence to support a specific foot position to target the other 3 heads of the quads. So personally, I just keep my feet pretty straight to make sure that I'm targeting each of the different heads pretty much evenly. Tip number 2 is you've got to push hard. Honestly, the quads can be pretty painful to train, but usually we've got a lot more reps in the tank left than we think we do. The mind gives up before the body does, so if you want maximum quad growth, then you're gonna have to push through the pain, ideally between 2 or 3 reps shy of muscular failure for optimal growth. One thing you can try is taking a pre-workout and or electrolytes during your workout to help give you that sustained energy, which is going to help you push harder. Currently, I don't personally take a pre-workout supplement. I just have a solid pre-workout meal, and then I do have electrolytes on my heavy leg days. And I found even just with the electrolytes, they've really made a big difference. If you are using pre-workout though, what I'd recommend is don't use it for every single workout because sometimes you can become adapted to that amount of caffeine. So save it for your heavy leg days and that will help you see a bigger benefit from it. Tip number 3 is what do you do when you hit a plateau? If you've not been feeling your quads as much in your leg days, or you feel like you've kind of hit a bit of a plateau, then take a look at the exercises in your routine. A lot of the time, the key to getting out of a plateau is switching up your exercise variation. So if you've mainly been doing barbell squats or using free weights, then try using machines for a few weeks. If you've not tried elevating your heels before, then you can do that as well. Or if you have been using machines, then there's other techniques you can use to get a bit more depth. So on the hack squat, you can get yoga blocks and put them on your shoulders, and that's going to help you get a bit deeper into that squat. For leg press, use that lower foot position to put more emphasis on the quads. And if your ankle mobility is holding you back, then you might want to try some mobility exercises to help you start working on that. Another thing that often helps me get out of plateaus is stripping the weight back and really focusing on my form for a week. And then when I go back, I usually find that I can get myself back out of that plateau a bit easier. Okay, now it's time for my favorite part where we put all of those tips together in the ultimate quad workout. Since the quads are pretty much an even split of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers, we're going to use a variety of rep ranges to target them most effectively. It's generally recommended that 6 sets or more are great for growth, but if you get up to 20, that's when you're starting to get into the non-recoverable zone. I'd say aiming for around 10 to 12 sets of quads per week is going to be good for most people if they want to see growth. Depending on how experienced you are in the gym, you may need more sets, you may need fewer sets, so it really comes down to the individual. You really don't need 101 different exercises for quads, so what I like to do is choose 2 quad exercises and split them up into 2 separate workouts per week. In my own workouts, I also tend to include some exercises for hamstrings and glutes as well, so bear that in mind when you're fitting these into your own sessions. We're going to start our leg workouts with our compound lifts while we've got the most energy. So for the first exercise in leg day number 1, you're going to choose a squatting movement. This can be a barbell back squat, it can be a Smith machine squat, it can be a hack squat or a pendulum squat. A lot of gyms won't have all of these machines, so that's why I've just said pick a squatting movement. And I want you to do 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps here. Use the tips we covered earlier in the video to help you emphasize the quads more, and as a general rule of thumb, you want to go slower on the lowering phase of the movement and then use more power on the upwards part of the movement. Since we're working in the 6 to 8 rep range, I want you to lift pretty heavy for this squat movement. For exercise 2, we're going to do 2 to 3 sets of 15 to 20 reps of leg extension. If you want to target your outer quad sweep a bit more, then point your toes inwards, and you're going to want to go pretty light for this one. You obviously obviously don't want to go too light so you're just bouncing the weight around, but pick a weight that you can lift with proper form and control until you hit 2 or 3 reps shy of failure in that 15 to 20 rep range. Also make sure that you're properly contracting and squeezing the quads at the top because you're going to get a lot more out of it that way. For leg day number 2, I want you to pick a different squatting movement, and this time you're going to do 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps. You want to go lighter with this squatting movement than you did on our first leg day just because you're using a higher rep range, but this is also the movement where I'd recommend you use elevated heels. For exercise 2, we're going to do 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps of leg extension. If you pointed your toes inwards for leg extension on day 1, this time you're going to point your toes straight ahead. As an optional finisher, you can do 15 to 20 reps of sissy squats. These are gonna burn, I'm just going to tell you that now. And they can be quite hard to get used to the form if you're a beginner. So I'd recommend holding on to something just so you've got a bit more balance. So let me know how you get on. This is going to be pretty intense, but I promise you, you're going to become Quadzilla by the end of it. But a really important part of building balanced legs and increasing your lower body strength is training your glutes. So make sure you watch this video next to learn everything you need to build strong glutes. See you there!